We're going to go through a simple VoIP configuration in Cisco Packet Tracer. To get started, we need a few devices. We'll need a 2811 router. We're going to take a 2960 switch, and we're going to grab two IP phones. We can start by connecting the router to the switch, and we're going to leave the phones disconnected for now. Let's jump onto the router and start with this configuration. There's a few things we need to do. First things first, we're going to go set an IP address and configure the Fast Ethernet 0 interface. So we're going to config T, interface Fast Ethernet 00, and let's set an IP address of something like 192.168.10.1, and we'll just make this a slant 24. Turn the interface on, and we've got that part completed. Next part we're going to go through is setting up DHCP. When managing VoIP phones, setting them up with DHCP is going to be a lot easier. If you think about the sheer volume of phones that you may have, it's going to be difficult to statically assign an IP address to each of those phones. Let's get out of the interface configuration and set up DHCP. We're going to create a pool, so we'll do IP DHCP pool. Let's call this pool voice. Let's do IP DHCP pool voice. Must have had a typo there. So IP DHCP pool voice, see what options we have. We're going to set the default router as 192.168.10.1, so this router's IP address. The network is 192.168.10.0, and this is the slant 24. And one more thing we're going to have to do here, we're going to set option 150, the IP address 192.168.10.1. What this does is specifies the router as a TFTP server for those phones. When the phones are plugged on and looking, they're going to try to get a configuration, which they'll be referred to by this option here in DHCP. Perfect. Once we have that, we're going to back out of the DHCP config, and we're going to exclude this router's IP address from DHCP. So IP DHCP excluded address 10.1. Next thing we're going to do, jump into the telephony configuration. So all we do from config T is go into telephony. And what we're going to do in this is set up I'll show you some of the options we have. We're going to set up the maximum number of directory numbers supported. So this is how many phone numbers are we going to support, how many physical phones are we going to support, and then the IP address for our telephony service and fallback, which will be this router here. What we're going to do is we're going to say max DN, so we'll say 5 phone numbers. Max E phones, we'll say 5 phones, so it's a 1-to-1 mapping there. The IP source address is 10.1, so that's this router, and I happen to know that the port that we're using for this is 2000. One more option we didn't talk about here was the auto registration. What this allows me to do is when this router detects a new phone has been plugged in, is it will automatically map that phone as one of the E phones. So it looks at its IP address, looks at the MAC address, and reserves its place as one of the phones. Let's do the auto assign 1 to 5. So this will automatically pick up all 5 of those phones I can connect to this. There we have it. We're going to take a break from the router's configuration for just a minute, so we're going to switch over to the switch in the middle here. And what I'm going to do is configure the first 5 switch ports as my phone ports. So we're going to get config T, interface range, Fast Ethernet, 0, 1 through 5. We're going to call these access mode ports. And we're going to tell them to access a voice VLAN specifically. Now remember, we could daisy chain a computer off of the switch, or off of the phone rather, which is connected to the switch. To do that, the best recommendation is to have 2 separate VLANs. In this case, we're not doing it, so just one VLAN should work fine. So what we're going to do is we're going to say switch port voice VLAN 1. the switch should be configured and ready for us to go. If we close out of the switch here, plug in our phones, we're going to go from the switch, fast Ethernet 2, to the phone, the switch port for the phone. We're going to have to open up the phones here and drag your power adapter to the phone so it's plugged in and ready to go. If we switch over to the GUI, you can see it's looking for an IP address. What we'll do here, we'll just fast forward time. We want to make sure that this phone gets an IP address. So far, so good. If we go back to the router, the last thing we need to do is map the phone numbers to each of these phones. We have to pick those phone numbers still. If I get out of the telephony configuration, what I'm going to do is say ephone dn. So this is phone number 1. The number I'm going to choose for this, we can pick really anything here. Let's say 54,001. We'll exit out of that, set it up for the second phone number, so ephone dn2. And we'll set up the number 54002. So what you see happening here is this was the auto registration. Basically, ephone 1 with the IP address of 10.2 registered itself as a phone. If I were to end this and do a show run, we would be able to see in here that we should have a phone registered in this. So right here. These are the phone numbers we just configured. This was a result of the auto configuration or the auto assignment that we allowed previously. Now what I'm expecting to see here is if I go hover over this phone again, we see that it has a line number of 54,001. If I were to click it, you can also see that phone number has been assigned to this phone as well. Let's connect up the second phone and see if this works. So again, we have to plug in the phone, switch over to the GUI, fast forward time a bit, and here you can see this phone's been registered as 54,002. Now, one thing with VoIP phones, kind of the easiest way to do this is if these had different length phone numbers on here, you can run into some problems. So typically what I will do, get both phones up here, is when I'm going to place a VoIP call, I will typically on my phone dial the phone number of my recipient first and then pick up the handset. So I would dial 54002. When I pick up the handset, it's going to send this off to the call manager. We can then see this phone is ringing. If we were to answer it, so actually picking it back up, you now see we have a phone call in place between these two handsets. Same thing, if we hang up the phone, that goes away, the line is freed back up again. So as a quick introduction to a simple setup for VoIP phones in the Cisco world.